after the attack.
Yeah, fucking A. Live on location from
Parma, Ohio.
Sleeveless Joe.
Perfect time.
Sleeves are back. The sleeveless look is back, I see.
That's right. Well, my Jenkos are in the wash. So we have to Best of 99, live from Parma, the new metal capital of the world. It's fitting. You know, we couldn't do it in Cuyahoga Falls. We're going to do the year of new metal. We have to do it.
Oh my God.
In Parma.
Yeah, unfortunately, lots of new metal that year.
Honestly, lots of great stuff though. When we talked about doing this year, I think we kind of picked this year as a joke. And as we got into it, I have more for this year than I did for 95.
Yeah, definitely.
And I was looking back, and it's an interesting. I was trying to struggle to find, a theme. It's chaos. The theme is just everything is just it's nuts.
There's so much shit that came out that was, and I know what we probably said it last time with 95, but that was shit was like so. I mean, it was like a transition. Transitional period. It was so monumental to us. But this, I was looking at this, I'm like, this is the same shit,
Right.
It's
almost worse.
Yeah, I mean, there was just too much, honestly. I mean, this could be like a 17-hour episode.
It could be.
And all the fucking killer shows I saw just that year, maybe, I would probably say starting in 99, 99 to 2000, just so many amazing concerts, that I'll get into.
I was going to say that because we're like, I know you're a few years older than I am, but this is close to the time when I started actually going to to things. Like we're closer to when I can actually start experiencing, when I was a part of the music scene. 95, I'm still too young. Everything I was into that was more retrospective. Like here, it's like, it's a little more personal, so it's going to get like that. I really don't know, honestly, where to start, but I think you know what? I'm just going to start it off. Let's get it out of the way. My top of 99.
This is your top?
It's the best record of 99. As far as personal experiences, we're going to go to 8th grade when I first met that son of a bitch, Anthony Biello, walking home from school. We got Burning Red, Machine Head. It's the...
Oh, fuck the rest of you.
It's a great album, dude. As far as the new metal stuff, let's get it out of the way. It was perfect for me. It was awesome. When you're 14 years old, this record's great. I'm saying that, but I'm 38, still jamming it.
Yeah.
After a night home at the bar, I'm rapping. I got the cheetah hair going on. I got the, I bust the fishnet shirt out, and the stuff. It's great.
I was actually at a show. It may have been at the Agora Ballroom. That or the Flying Machine, which I saw many shows there that year. But I remember somebody, they put it on before, like between bands or whatever.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, like, I liked the production on it, but I thought, man, this sounds like Machine Head, but it's just a little too bouncy. Like, I don't know. There's no way this can, because coming from the More Things Change to that. And then they did the Message in the Bottle cover came on, and I thought, man, this is a Machine Head, especially the one part I always tease you about. And I think is it on Desire to Fire where he's like, I don't know, I think I know you too well.
Yes, Desire to Fire.
Oh my God.
I mean, it's definitely like here's the thing, man. Like this is like, not to be this guy, but like, Anthony and I, especially when we were younger, like we got really into the extreme stuff really early. So the new metal thing kind of escaped us for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't really into Korn. Follow the Leader came out a year before this, and we weren't really into that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We were more into Machine Head before. This is the one new metal record I shamelessly still really love. Like, I mean, we have like other records on here we're probably going to talk about that are quasi. We'll get to the big one in a moment. But this Machine Head record to me still was... It was catchy. It still had that Machine Head sound a little bit. It wasn't a new metal record I was embarrassed to like.
Yeah.
It wasn't Limp Bizkit to me. It wasn't, it wasn't Soul. And we liked Soulfly a little
because
bit.
Because it's an old school metal band to me, like Rob Flynn coming from Violence, and the first two Machine Heads were Burn My Eyes is, one of the greatest albums of the 90s as far as I'm concerned. And I think it's the fact that it's them doing a new metal album.
It's a total grab for popular. It is a shameless grab for attention.
Oh,
I get it. That is the case, but I think, and Biello has said it to me before too. It's really just our age.
Mm-hmm.
I think if that record would have came out, and I was 4 years older or 3 years older, I would laugh at it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think because of the age I was at, impressionable time, it's still really catchy to me. And that first Slipknot was also an amazing. I mean, for '99, to me, I didn't feel the first Slipknot. We may as well get right into it. It's an amazing, heavy record.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a good metal record. To this day, Corey Taylor's vocals on that first Slipknot are incredible to me.
I still think he's, and I know a lot of, some people are watching, probably like, holy shit, I can't believe they're praising this stuff. And we were talking,
We're getting it out of the way early.
just before this, we were eating dinner. It's like, to me, new metal's garbage.
Yeah.
It's absolute shit. It's like the fucking Monster Energy of heavy metal. It was just an embarrassing scene.
Yeah. Embarrassing look.
It was literally like fucking county fair metal.
Right.
And
it seemed like the record industry was desperately trying to make heavy music relevant.
Yeah, and they just chose the wrong bands.
Sure.
But I will always say I respect Korn for their longevity. Their drummer now, Ray Luzier, is fucking amazing. He played with David Lee Roth. He plays with Doug Pinnick from King's X and George Lynch from Docket in a band called KXM, which they have several albums out, and the guy's a great drummer.
Yeah, I sometimes forget that they have him in there.
And I don't hate, like, they just, it's not like I like them or hate them. They're just kind of there.
Were you into Korn in the mid-90s?
No. Yeah. I saw them open for them when I lived in Portland, Oregon. We had tickets. It was supposed to be Deftones, Korn, and Ozzy. Mm-hmm. Deftones dropped off that I think that particular night. Thank God, because I fucking hate that.
They're the worst band in the world to me.
But Korn came on, and I remember a dude that I went to high school with at that time was like really big into them and kept, telling me, no, you got to check this out. You got to check it out. The album cover with like the little girl.
Yeah, the self-titled one. Yeah.
But they were fine live. They sounded perfect, but I was never a fan because it was just always kind of goofy. And I think what Issues came out in '99.
It did. I omitted it, but we may as well. Yeah, which I think was to me, Slipknot was a band that extreme metal guys could at least get into a little bit.
Well, that's the thing, is they were in, and they're still into extreme metal.
Yeah. Joey Jordison played Anal Blast, which is is a great grind band.
He was a fucking amazing drummer. Now they got Jay Weinberg on drums.
And dude, this is an aggressive record. Like if I understand the look was a little bit something to be desired and maybe a little corny.
Mushroom headish.
A little mushroom headish, but to me, they're way heavier than any Mushroom Head album that ever came out. And I was never into Mushroom Head either.
No.
And I think that even, Haywood and other death metal guys that were older, like, still they were down a little bit of the first Slipknot. They understood it was metal record.
Do you remember years ago when, before Joey Belladonna came back to Anthrax, there was a rumor that Corey Taylor was going to be the Anthrax vocalist, and I thought,
I think he'd be a good John Bush replacement. I think that'd be fine for
But I was like, you know what? Dude's got a really cool voice,
He can sing.
Mm-hmm. And I love a lot of the riffs and stuff, even a lot of the later stuff I still dig. This one, I remember, I was telling you, I was at a buddy's house, my buddy Arnie, and he had a bunch of other people over. I think the dudes from Drogheda, the local grind band, they were there. Somebody it wasn't me, and it wasn't Arnie, somebody that came over brought that album. Mm-hmm. And I saw the cover, and I thought,
here we go. Yeah.
This is a fucking circus, dude. This is going to be stupid. Right. And at that time, Roadrunner Records started. That was like,
Yeah.
With Slipknot, and then when they signed Nickelback, it just
They were kind of
started.
moving away from what they were before.
And I thought, oh, this is gonna suck.
That's something I was gonna say too. The Roadrunner's kind of moving away from, because like Fear Factory kind of set the tone for this with the vocals with Corey Taylor. I mean, that's what I was gonna get with. That's like he can sing and scream. It's like they were moving in that direction a few years before.
And I don't blame Fear Factory for that, because Fear Factory's fucking. I think they're amazing, and that was just. It's kind of like when people blame Nirvana for killing metal. Nirvana didn't set out to kill metal.
Without a record, yeah.
It just kind of is what it is.
I think Fear Factory was a big seller for Roadrunner, and I think they got a lot. I mean, at some
I'd
point,
be interested to see how much they did sell. Obviously, we know how much Slipknot sold.
I mean, this kind of does, for better lack of better. I mean, I think Demanufacture was a pretty big record for Roadrunner.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely at the time. I mean, it had a lot of push, a lot more press in the mainstream magazines and on MTV than other bands. I mean, I didn't really hear Pierce from Within on MTV. So it kind of propelled that. So it was the only thing that was kind of happening. And weird segue, but I mean, I had Godflesh too that I mentioned, came out with Us and Them '99.
Now I never heard that.
And it's crazy because that's an album too that's a lot of trip hop, a lot of hip hop beats, and they don't get enough credit for influencing a lot of new metal bands as well. But Korn toured with Godflesh,
and so they toured with Godflesh.
Yeah, Korn played a lot of their early shows in '94, '95 with Godflesh.
But I never heard that Godflesh album. I started reading up on it, and I guess there's a lot of people that fucking despise it because of the drum and bass type stuff that they do.
Justin Broderick hated it. He thought it was cringy.
I listened to it, and you could tell it's 100% Godflesh. It's nowhere near one of my, I don't think it touches the early stuff.
No, it's not Street Cleaner by a million miles.
Or Pure,
it's better than a lot of stuff that tries to be like Godflesh. Mm-hmm. I think it's still a cool record, but it's definitely a little, they're experimenting with a lot of stuff.
This is like 99, I think, was the year that really broke me into, 95 I was getting into heavier stuff, like we said, in the other episode, but 99 is really when I just started taking chances and buying different shit and just being like, oh my God, dude, this stuff is getting into way heavier stuff. And, a lot of black metal, death metal. I think one of the biggest things that came out that year that completely changed a lot was Immortal at the Heart of Winter.
I have it on there. It's a great record.
Dude, because it I was never really into the black metal thing. Mm-hmm. I thought Corpse Paint, those guys look like fucking clowns,
I don't think you need to be for this record. I think it's a great metal record, yeah.
Yeah, and I remember when I put it in, I was like, okay, the production, Peter from Hypocrisy did it, which we'll get into.
It's a Peter record. Oh, yeah, we're going to get there. It's a massive sounding record, though.
That's it. It's it doesn't sound like some lo-fi black metal.
Sounds like a Metallica record.
It's fucking huge,
it's pretty big.
Dude.
Yeah, it's big.
And then when it busts into that riff on the first
Solarfall, and
my God.
I remember seeing the advertisements for the record, and when Biello and I got this, I look back and it's I agree with you. It's one of the first black metal records I got into. Mm-hmm. I don't think I knew it was black. You know what I'm saying? When you're kind of getting into stuff like that, you don't really know. You hear about black, it was okay. But when I remember getting into Transylvanian Hunger and stuff like that, and being this is something different. This is a good metal record.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, I remember Arnie telling me back then that that's black metal, but this is black metal. And then he puts on Mayhem.
We had the same thing. We had a friend named Heather who was a cult black metal girl, and she'd be like, yeah. That's a cool record. That's all right. We're gonna get this Satyricon record. And she's like, but these are the ones you need to listen. I was like, I'm thinking about it. But this Immortal record kind of sounds really fucking good though.
That's the thing, dude. I think it was just accessible to so many different people that would never listen to black metal, and I think that a lot of people got past Abbott's or Abath, however you say it, his vocals.
Yeah.
Because the riffs were so fucking
I thought
good.
his vocals were better on this one than a lot of other. I like Dan in Black a lot. The next one was the first one I really loved.
Yes.
So it's, and I think these two records pair well together. I think they started when they started moving, like when they started incorporating. We talked about this in '95. When they started incorporating more death metal, more Morbid Angel, more thrash, and stuff, like they were a machine, and they had their own sound. They didn't need to do raw black metal like that. Other bands were kind of doing that. Like I had Nemesis, not Nemesis. I'm sorry, I had a Rebel Extravaganza on my list, '99. Same kind of thing. Like I got into this Satyricon record. It's weird. A lot of people look at the type, like the cover, and they think, "Oh, it's industrial." There's nothing industrial. That's a vicious record. It's probably one of the harshest records. Tommy Haywood and I still to this day worship that record. It's vicious. It sounds like a bestial machine. And I remember at the time, people were like, "This is not really black metal. It's moving away from their sound." And I remember putting it on as a young kid, being like, "This is insane."
It was just dirtier.
Really dirty, really, really harsh, heavy. Same kind of thing with the Immortal in a different way, like blending the heaviness in a different, kind of atmosphere. The atmosphere really makes it. The atmosphere of At the Heart of Winter makes the record. Yeah. The atmosphere of Rebel Extravaganza makes the record.
I think when you go back and you listen to like Blizzard Beast, Pure Holocaust, and then you listen to At the Heart of Winter, it just took the early stuff and it almost just cleaned it up, and you could hear the guitars at the forefront. Like everything was just right there in your face, rather than being more of a lo-fi like wall of sound.
Right.
And I don't want to say that it was like tinny the way that it sounded, like a lot of black metal. Again, it's like the lo-fi part of it. But with At the Heart of Winter, I mean, it literally was just like a fucking bomb that went off when that came on. And it was like, holy shit. And I think that honestly, when I started hearing a lot of black metal bands after that putting stuff out, it was almost, I don't know if it could be coincidental, but it was almost they thought, you know what, we should actually have better production.
Yeah.
And then maybe you could hear what we're doing a little more.
I think Peter really helped with that record too. I mean, I know you have something to say about the Hypocrisy, but it's like I think the production on that really, really did help with that sound. I think those kind of bands benefited from a bigger sound because they had more going on. I know I had, like, as far as black metal, may as well just mention them because there's not really much to talk about. I had Abigor, and I had Judas Iscariot, Heaven in Flames. Great records, great lo-fi black metal records for what they are. But I think I love Heaven in Flames. I love Abigor, But I think Panzer Division Marduk, another record where it's like that massive sound. It was that Marduk sound just pumped up to 100. And it was so much more vicious and so much more intense and so much more extreme. There wasn't anything like it. It's a solid blast beat for like 28 minutes.
Yeah.
Like the drums don't, it's like Transylvanian Hunger, the drums don't change. The drums on Panzer Division don't change for 28 minutes. It's like straight blasting.
I'll say this about Panzer Division. That's probably up to that point, it's my least favorite Marduk album.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
It's like literally one song from beginning to end. I know people that either worship it or they fucking hate it. And I'm in the category, I can't stand it, especially coming after, Nightwing.
Nightwing's my favorite, yeah.
Nightwing was so good, and I don't know. Panzer Division is literally, it is like a fucking Panzer tank. it's rolling. It's pretty
obnoxious.
Yeah,
but I think what Peter was doing was really trying to bring out that massiveness of, at least I think these black metal bands were trying to incorporate more into it, bring that kind of broader thing. But I know you want to talk about that Hypocrisy, so you may as well.
Well, that was, I heard other Hypocrisy albums, and I remember dubbing The Fourth Dimension, or Arnie dubbed that album for me. And I loved it. I dug it. It was like not your typical just like blast beat.
Yeah.
It was different to me. And I thought, wow, this is really cool. And then the new album came out, the self-titled 99. and I picked it up, and dude, it was so much more. The clean vocals, like there were parts that almost sounded Alice in Chain-ish, the way that the vocals were.
Yeah, I mentioned layered vocals.
Yeah, and I just thought that was a massive. That is the album that made me fall in love with Hypocrisy.
Really, I know Anthony loved it a lot too. A lot of my friends really liked that. I always liked Final Chapter more. I think self-titled Hypocrisy is cool. My Peter record for '99 was Lock Up. Pleasure to Pave Sewers.
Dude, I remember.
And I remember, Napalm, had Words from the Exit Wound.
Was it Nick Barker, the drummer?
Yeah, and Nick Barker was in Lock Up, and I remember when Peter did his first and only Lock Up record. Lock Up's been going on for a long time. But I was, again, we've spoken before how I was really into grind and stuff like that, and it's still. I think Peter's vocals on it are awesome. It was like one of those albums where it's like a bunch of guys got together, did like a drunken session. And they just, because Napalm at this time, like we talked about in 95, was kind of meandering, kind of doing different stuff. Napalm's record at this time is, not really grind record. It's not really a harsh record. I think Peter, kind of broke kind of made them go back to their roots with that kind of stuff. So the Hypocrisy record was cool. I think it's a good Hypocrisy album, but I think his Lock Up record was really, really vicious because Hypocrisy was kind of moving away from their death metal sound.
It's definitely a dynamic album. There's so many different songs, different styles of songs on that album. You got like death metal, you got just like speed thrash songs, then you got like the more ethereal, doomy songs.
And I was going to ask about Nick Barker because did Cruelty and the Beast come out in '99 or was that '9? I wasn't never a big Cradle fan.
I don't know because I was never a Cradle fan, but I met him at the Flying Machine around that time.
Okay.
This may have been when I think we went to see Dimmu, which I think is the show I told you that Monstrosity played. I think it's that. With their In Dark Purity album, which is '99,
right?
Which is a
good album,
fucking
solid death metal album, yeah,
dude.
It's like we talked about '95 with some bands just sinister hate. It's just a solid album,
dude. It's like from front to back, even the fucking Angel of Death cover.
There's really nothing else to say about it. It's just a solid Monstrosity.
But Nick Barker, I remember, it had to be that show because I think he just started. I think he quit Cradle, and then he went to Dimmu, and I also think that. The one dude, ICS Vortex, may have been in Borknagger, I think. I'm not a big Borknagger guy, so somebody could probably correct me on that. But I think that's when he also joined Dimmu. But he was just standing there, and I walked up and I was like, Nick Barker. I mean, you could tell he's covered in tattoos.
He's also massive, yeah.
And he was like the nicest, most soft-spoken dude.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey man, how you doing? And but that had to be that show around that time. So I'm thinking, because there's so many different shows I saw at the Flying Machine, but yeah, it had to be around '99.
I got, it's as far as like the Hypocrisy stuff goes too. I mean, I think God Dethroned, Bloody Blasphemy. That was if I had to pick a melodic record, that's my melodic death metal. I think that's Metal Blade album. Really love that one. It's a great album. I think it's not really much else to say about it. It's just a great melodic death metal record. I think Hypocrisy, that self-title, I really have to go back and revisit because it always kind of skipped me a little bit. Love Final Chapter, love Fourth Dimension. Into the Abyss after this one, I liked a lot too.
I think Into the Abyss was like a little heavier.
Yeah, a little more stripped down. It kind of went back to
it didn't have like that sci-fi feel to it. It was a little more back to like maybe the earlier days to me. But one of the main shows from that year that was just fucking amazing, and it was at the Agora Ballroom, Cleveland. And 2 albums that came out that year in '99, and then these bands toured with each other, and that was Merciful Fate 9 and Nevermore, Dreaming Neon Black.
I knew you were going to put both of those. That's why I didn't really put it. The closest thing I had to that was I had Catatonia, It's a Nice Decision.
That's probably the last one I really like, honestly.
Really?
Yeah. The other stuff I don't hate, but it's just kind of...
As far as the Catatonia records, you don't like A Great Cold Distance?
Not too much.
Really?
Yeah.
See, I kind of lump...
Okay.
I don't know if I'm lumping Catatonia... I mean, I'm lumping it in with Nevermore. I think that makes kind of sense, but...
But it's like, that show, I still have the raglan from that show. And it was like Merciful Fate, the Don't Break the Oath, but then there was like the American flag.
Yeah.
You know, and...
It's a great Merciful Fate album.
I think it's technically the last Merciful Fate album.
I think it's fantastic. I actually like that album a lot.
Yeah, I think it's a great album. The fucking show was amazing. They headlined. When Nevermore came out, dude, they were so heavy. So if I remember, the speakers, the fucking stacks on stage fell over onto either Van Williams, the drummer, or one of the... I can't remember, but we were standing there and all of a sudden everything just kind of fell and it was just fucking pummeling.
I remember that Nevermore record being pretty popular, pretty in a lot of magazines.
That's what really, to me, that's what broke them. Dreaming Neon Black was just a perfect record from beginning to end. And I mean, they already had that history of coming from Sanctuary.
Yeah.
But it's like, you know, the self-titled Nevermore, yeah, okay, In Memory EP, like, all right. Politics of Ecstasy is fucking just ripping album. This just kind of took that even further.
Nevermore's a band that I did not get into until in my late 20s. Even check out to listen to it. It was one of those bands I just never, paid attention to. And I think after we go through the kind of list, you'll get why. I mean, Ravishing Grimness I was more into.
Yeah.
We talked about black metal albums before, but it's like I was, the Nevermore thing, I thought they were going to be heavier than they were, I think, at the time. I think when you check it out, you're like, I don't really get it. But then afterwards, I get into Sanctuary, get into other bands, and you kind of develop a like for it or an affinity for what they're doing. And now I really appreciate it. It's really good metal record. I think if that record came out now, I would love it.
Yeah.
But I think at the time it was, a little, a different pill to swallow. I mean, I know, like, where's a band like Skin Lab? I know we're big Skin Lab guys.
I saw.
Metal band, classic metal band. I think that was more like, as far as regular metal goes, I think Skin Lab was a band that I saw, and I kind of could relate to it with the Pantera sound and stuff like that, being younger.
Yeah, and that Skin Lab, especially those first two, I think, were just really, on the heels of Burn My Eyes.
Yeah.
The More Things Change.
I don't hear a new metal thing with Skin Lab either. I don't hear it.
To me, it's more of like a hardcore.
Yeah, it's more just a classic American metal kind of thing to it.
So, and I actually saw them on that tour at Ron's Crossroads in Akron, and I was like, holy shit, they're coming to fucking Ron's Crossroads. And
was it like a chili dog place? What is that, like a...
Oh, it's not even there anymore. It's completely gone. But it was literally the size of your apartment here.
Right, past chili dogs.
Yeah, it was just so small, but and I think it was just them headlining, and that's where I got the long sleeve.
Yeah.
That you want.
Oh yeah.
Every time you see it, the Disembody, the New Flesh, but and that I don't think that they ever really jumped into straight new metal because you had Steve Esquivel coming from Defiance. Scott Sargent was in the band. Scott Sargent was from, I knew he was on a Lost Rocket album.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they have some pedigree there.
Yeah,
definitely. And they and Skin Lab toured with Napalm and other bands too. Played some shows with Napalm Death and heavier bands like that. They definitely had a lineage with underground for thrash and extreme stuff. So it's that modern metal kind of making that big leap. And I think death metal at the time, I mean, this is really where this year specifically is really where the grind and the death metal for me really germinate big time. I mean, Devourment, Molesting the Decapitated, Eternal Suffering, Drowning in Tragedy. You have so many Internal Bleeding, Driven to Conquer. Death metal goes. We talked about '95, how death metal was getting a little bit more groovier. Vomit, Remnants, Supreme Entity. These are death metal bands that are really bringing the groove, the gutturals. That's when it was all big shirts and kind of dressing like you looked like you belonged in Cypress Hill, and like death metal guys stopped looking like leather jacket thrash guys and started looking like they might bust out and join Wu-Tang Clan at any given moment. And like the groove was there, and I remember like that being a big part of my life, and probably maybe coming from the Machinette thing, being younger, and like that was it was an easy transition.
Yeah.
Getting into Devourment and stuff, and I remember older death metal guys, younger kids listening. If older guys give you shit for listening to younger death metal bands now and saying it's, believe me, they gave us a lot of shit for liking Devourment and Internal Bleeding and that kind of hyper groove. Like they did not like, and they still don't like it.
Well, I mean, that stuff you call slam.
What would eventually be like slam stuff like that? Yeah.
I hate using the word breakdowns.
It's
because people, but
it's overplayed now. But yeah,
the like real chunky riffs and the chugging, you know,
and the hyper guttural vocals and that kind of like it was more like I think death metal. As bands are kind of expanding, going to more hypocrisy territory, you get Molesting the Decapitated.
Yeah, but all those guttural vocals they're still so much better than the shit I hear today.
Yeah.
Where the shit today, it's like somebody listened to an Incantation record and then just every band is like this Incantation ripoff, and it's like, I don't mind Incantation sounding like that, but the way death metal vocals, they're just faceless. There's like nothing
There's no
to
oomph to it. Yeah, I think that's the production too, and I think like a lot of that comes from like, you know, I mean, Deeds came out with like Path of the Weakening too, so it's like this is the last era where it stops being, you know, really digitized production.
Yeah.
You kind of still had to do it. Like when we first heard Devourment, and again, you know, I talk about this with Paul and other people too, where it's like, this was the last extreme terrain death metal could really go at the time. And I think in the late 90s, by this time, Cannibal Corpse puts out Bloodthirst, and it's a decent, you know, record. I think Deranged had a great record with 3, which is a good brutal death metal record. There were still some bands doing that classic style a lot really well, but I think that you had to take it somewhere. You had to take it to a different level somewhere, and I think these bands were just incorporating the extra element of groove, and it was new.
Yeah.
You don't have to like it, but it's something, they're at least doing something different with the genre at a time when I think black metal this time is more interesting.
Yeah.
But I think death metal had to do something.
Well,
otherwise
that first wave of those death metal bands seemed to, you know, by 99, it was a little less American death metal, U.S. death metal, and it was more European.
Yeah.
It was, you know, like Hypocrisy and stuff. And I mean, you could even make the case that, you know, there are bands like Grave and Entombed and stuff at this time. They were also, I mean, Grave, you know, the same with Unleashed, was kind of putting out crap albums.
Yeah, kind of meandering around.
But for me, another massive album that really, one of my favorite thrash bands of all time, if not my favorite thrash band, Testament.
There we go. Great album.
With The Gathering.
Love it.
That was just fucking, that came out of nowhere to me. Because I like Demonic, but it's my least favorite Testament album.
Yeah, I like Low a lot more than Demonic.
Oh, Low is fucking my favorite Testament album. So when Demonic came out, I was like, all right, man, you guys are just trying to do like the groovier, more death metal side of
it. Was a miss. It didn't sound genuine. Yeah.
And then when The Gathering came out with, the only problem I have with it is the lack of guitar solos.
I agree too. Yeah, James Murphy. Yeah, why are there no good? Yeah, I agree with you. Like,
but
no
the lineup was fucking killer. I saw this tour.
It's awesome.
With The Haunted opening at the Agora Ballroom, and that was when my buddy Mark that I went with, he wanted to park. We'd never been to the Agora before, and I was like, I'm pretty sure they have a parking area. And he was like, no, I'm just going to park in this gas station next.
That sounds safe.
And he walks inside, and the guy was like, yeah, just pay me $20 and you can park there. We came out, obviously his car's broken into.
Right.
but all of his fucking heavy metal
Or
CDs
stacked.
were stacked neatly and left on the seat. Everything else was gone.
That's great.
And he was like so pissed. I'm like, look, dude, you're gonna file a police report. Whatever CD that he had, a stereo system, if you sent the company a police report, they sent you like another. I think it was just the faceplate that they took.
Right.
So if they took the faceplate or something, they would send you another one or something. I was like, you're gonna get this shit back. The best part is your fucking CD book with all of your CDs on top were stacked nice and neat.
Right.
You left them.
Yeah. Nobody was interested.
I'm like, you made out.
Right. They probably looked at it like, the fuck am I getting for this?
But that was an incredible. I mean, Testament was back. They were heavy.
I love this era of Testament. It's funny. Like I've talked about Testament with Mike from Hammer a lot recently, and I really champion this era of them a lot. It's a little more extreme metal terrain. It's not classic thrash.
Mm-hmm.
I love Low. I love The Gathering. I like Demonic too. Really from Souls of Black on, I think they're a great. I think a lot of bands of their era weren't interesting at this time. I mean, is there an Exodus record we're talking about right now? No. They at least did something that's like they incorporated other stuff into their sound, made it like they stayed relevant. I think for a younger generation, that's important. That's hard to do for a band of that era. Dude, people forget, man, the '90s. This time in the '90s too, especially '99. Anything '80s related is so far. I really don't have anything on my list. I'm going through it, and that's kind of something I really wanted to highlight. There's really nothing that I can even see that. Only Darkthrone Ravishing Grimness is probably the closest thing to me that resembles the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing 80s at all is cool. For Testament to be relevant in 99, I think people need
the
to
only two I
take a
have.
hard look at that.
I mean, there's more bands that released albums, but really just Testament and Merciful Fate were like the two 80s bands that were, that made it onto my list of everything else was like newer, everything. It was totally different. I mean, Amon Amarth had The Avenger, which is, a great album before they turned into a
even like,
goofy cornball band they are now.
We talked last time about the grind bands I had kind of keeping the 80s thing alive. Even the grind bands I had, I have on this like Cerebral Turbulency and Mesrine and Rot, SOB, Dub Grind, like that's all still, it's almost like taking it to another level of that style. Retaliation, The Execution, which is, shout out to Henke, it's my favorite grind record of the 90s. Keeping it way more extreme, going way forward. It doesn't sound like Scum in the 80s. They're taking it to another level like death metal was, where it's like, I think that's really at this time, I think in music, bands really aren't interested in kind of doing what bands did before them. Like the death metal record I have that's a local one is Regurgitation, Tales of Necrophilia, which is a classic brutal death metal record in 99. Like the Ohio Death Fest in 99 here was huge, and Ablated Records was massive, and brutal death metal really was a thing. It was its own new, fresh thing. It was fresh and new, and it was lively in the underground, and people had kind of moved away from that early 90s thing. It was something more extreme, more intense. I think you need that with genres. You need people to move it forward and not so much. Now it seems like bands want to recreate the past so much. They're so hell-bent on capturing the sound of the past. Like, you got to do your own thing too.
Yeah. Well, that's why I, kind of going off of that, one of the best albums from that time was Dan Swano's Moon Tower, which was moving forward to me because the fucking 70s like prog keyboards with. That's a great album.
I can't believe that came out in 99. It's kind of nuts.
And Rotting Christ put out Sleep of the Angels, which is another great album. They were kind of one from the early 90s that they were still kind of chugging along.
Yeah. I think they kind of had developed a sound and an audience by then.
I don't think it was until maybe Genesis or I think Sanctus Diabolos that they did some different stuff here and there, but they really were kind of straight ahead, doing their own thing.
It's kind of how I felt about Times of Grace and Morgion, Solinary, and Isis, Red Sea. That kind of atmospheric stuff we talked about in '95. Those bands have kind of developed their own audience. That's their own thing. Times of Grace is kind of lauded as the greatest Neurosis album, and it's '99.
Yeah.
And Isis would go on eventually in the 2000s to be a massive band. Something I kind of noticed about '99 too. A lot of these bands, Pig Destroyer puts out the split with Knob in '99. These bands were kind of Pig Destroyer, Isis, Neurosis. These bands were kind of throughout the 2000s would kind of go to dominate a lot of the underground. They're putting out these releases now, doing their own thing and getting that sound, and they kind of develop. Rotting Christ would develop. Eventually, they become a standard bearer of that sound. It's kind of how it works in this time period.
Yeah, for sure. And I know there's one band that put out their final album, the album that is like their peak for me, their pinnacle. And then after this, I just gave up, and they turned into fucking Air Supply, and that was Anathema, Judgment.
Yeah.
Phenomenal album, super moody. I think these guys really hit it out of the park. Obviously, it doesn't sound anything, like Pentecost or Serenades.
Right. This is when we start to get the Art Garfunkel kind of look.
Yeah, and it was really after this. I think Fine Day to Exit was the next album, and it just wasn't great. And after this, they really just kind of turned into, like I said, like an Air Supply cover band. And I know my buddy Jay is gonna kill me because he's like, oh man, I loved Air Supply when I was a kid, but it's like, yeah, but you know what? Not when it's Anathema and they're putting out such a great album, and then after this they turn into this just really sappy, corny fucking British band to me. But also Arch Enemy put out their last album that I ever bought, and that was Burning Bridges.
Okay.
Because that was the last one with is it Johan? I can't remember the dude's name, the lead vocalist, but before
they got the female singer.
Yeah, because Angela Gossell was next on, I think, The Wages of Sin, and I just fucking gave up. It was just corny. Burning Bridges is just a killer melodic death metal album. That's
a weird, I think that's a good segue, because that melodic, we talked about melodic death metal in '95, and to me '99, as I was going back into it, I had tons of grind. I mean, I had Flesh Grinder, and I had Lymphatic Phlegm, and I had Realized Demo, and Squash Bowels. I'm going to mention all that stuff, but it's all great stuff. Grind was really massive in this time in the late '90s, but it's really dominated by metalcore. To me, I think really this is the year of metalcore. I mean, it really is. Catharsis, great band, one of my favorite bands. You have Botch, We Are the Romans, you have Cave In, Until Your Heart Stops, Prayer for Cleansing, Dillinger Escape Plan. This is like, Calculating Infinity. Metalcore was so massive, taking influence from that. A lot of these bands, Undying especially, Poison the Well, Opposite of December, taking influence from those melodic death metal bands. And we talked about how in '95, At the Gates would go on to influence the metalcore bands. This is when it happens. This is when you start to see, looking back, like, holy shit, these bands really. This would come to dominate the next 10 years of underground massively. These bands would take over the whole world, and you look at it and it's like, I remember being a younger kid. I was messaging my friend Adam before, because he took me to my first, in '99, 2000, took me to my first Dying Fetus show with All Out War and Earth Crisis, and I remember walking in and just wondering why everybody was in basketball jerseys and why they're being terrified, and seeing these kind of bands. Saw Dillinger early on. They were, to going from being a death metal kid to seeing bands kind of stand around, to seeing guitar players jump into the crowd and play, like it's really mesmerizing to you. And this metalcore scene really did, it took over a lot of stuff. And I think for a reason, these bands were a breath of fresh air in the hardcore scene. Whereas I think metal was in a weird place. Heavy music was, death metal was in a weirder place. It was more underground, more sick, really super underground. Black metal was getting more, hardcore was getting, I think, more expandable, where more people could get into it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, they were taking, obviously, they were copying a lot of the riffs from Slaughter of the Soul, that At the Gates album, and also In Flames, which I heard, not so much the stuff you're describing, but I think it was like maybe even a couple years later, really with like Killswitch Engage and Unearth and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely.
It got completely ridiculous. But the crazy thing is, like talking about In Flames and their influence on just the melodic, the riffs, the leads. And I remember Colony came out in '99, which I saw them on that tour. They were fucking amazing.
I love that album.
I almost wore the shirt tonight. I still have it.
It's a great. That's a great album.
To me, it's like, honestly, it's the last great In Flames.
I think it's the last great In Flames album.
Until I heard Foregone, which is the one that just came out.
Yeah, you played that last time for me when we were hanging out.
And that gave me the same feel that Colony did. I was like, wow, this seems like there's a lot of old school influence to this. But when a lot of these metalcore kids, and I think you have to make a distinction between stuff like Botch and Cave In and Dillinger.
Even Catharsis was a little more punkin'.
Which I would say, yeah, that's hardcore, but it's metalcore. That's different than a lot of the stuff that came even, like I said, a couple years later, where it was they were just aping In Flames and At the Gates.
I think that hardcore, especially at this time. I mean, hardcore by the early to mid '90s had germinated and gotten a lot bigger. Victory Records had gotten huge, and I think that metalcore was a culmination of that sound of bands really incorporating a lot of other stuff into there. So hardcore was pretty big at this time. It had more energy to it. It had more fire behind it. I think a lot of death metal, I think the early death metal scene, it kind of fizzled out. Bands had kind of come and reached their apex and gone. I think black metal was always purposely underground, and by this time was getting a little bit bigger, but bands were incorporating more stuff to get bigger. And I think the bands that like Judas Iscariot that were doing orthodox black metal were staying underground on purpose. Whereas I think metalcore, I understand looking back at '99 why metalcore got so big. Bands were really, I think it was the right time, the right place. Hardcore was big enough. Metallic hardcore was big enough. And then you have all of a sudden bands like Botch that really are borderline not even so much orthodox hardcore bands. They're almost more like hardcore influenced metal bands.
Yeah.
You have Prayer for Cleansing, which is a hardcore influenced melodic death metal band. Undying is a hardcore influenced melodic death metal band. So you have these whole crop of bands that are to a group of hardcore kids giving a style of metal. That now it's giving metal to kids that metal audiences weren't used to getting metal to. Yeah. And that's when all of a sudden you get grindcore dudes mad that Dillinger Escape fans are at the show.
Yeah.
You get In Flames touring with Undying, and all of a sudden you get hardcore kids dancing for In Flames songs. You got fights at shows. People are like, "Wait a minute,
yeah." And
what happened?
I remember a kid specifically was a friend of my cousin's that was just strictly metalcore, and when I played him At the Gates and In Flames, he literally said, "Oh my God, these guys are ripping off," and then he named like all these metalcore bands, and I'm just like,
"Yeah,
you got it backwards, buddy. It's like the other way around." And I think that the first wave of this stuff was really good because it was like something fresh and new. But like we were talking earlier, it got lame and it got just oversaturated. It's like anything.
It's almost like in '99 what I kept thinking of. We talk about themes a lot. It's almost like there's a collapse of styles, and all of a sudden these subgenres and these people that have never had anything to do with each other got thrown together. Whereas you get, like I have on my list, I have Usurp Synapse, Reversal of Man, that kind of screamo-y kind of stuff that came out in '99, and great records. but it wasn't grindy, but that started melding itself into the grind scene. You had faster hardcore like Hell Nation, all of a sudden melding with these bands like Usurp Synapse, and it's like these styles don't belong together. Why are you seeing these? And I remember being younger and people had to be thrust together at shows, and it was. I think that's kind of good. I almost miss that in a way. I think that's something that's nowadays you can wake up on a Monday and be super into brutal death metal from Japan, and that's like your one thing. You know, back in this day, you had to be a hardcore kid. Like, all right, I like this Undying band. They're playing with, you know, In Flames.
Yeah.
Guess I better have all these metal guys hate me and want to. It's like, you know, you had to kind of go to you had to kind of be thrust into it and deal with it. I think that's important. I think that's cool. You don't see that anymore. And you know what? If the hardcore kid goes to the show and he's into, you know, Prayer for Cleansing and he goes to a metal show, it's like somebody might buy a Nevermore record. That's in a way, maybe that's hippie in me, but I kind of miss that.
No, I think that it became just way too compartmentalized, where a lot of those metalcore bands, probably because they were just different crowds, the metalcore bands like ended up only playing with metalcore bands, and for a lot of it, like, it didn't really mix at some point, and I think it just, in metalcore, for, you know, all intents and purposes, I think just kind of died out for the most part, except for maybe some of the bigger bands. And
it's funny, Turmoil that put out
that Turmoil, that's awesome.
A lot of metal fans I know still like this Turmoil record because I think it came out on Century Media.
Yeah, it was a Century Media.
And like I think because of the label it was on, I think it was just a good heavy record.
It was on the one song on that album. It was on one of those Identity comps, and you're listening to all this shit, you know, like Rotting Christ and Moonspell and Nevermore, and you know, I'm just like, oh, I'm down with all this. And then here comes this Turmoil song, and I was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
You know, and I remember Turmoil, Only Living Witness. There was another, Sub-Zero, was that another hardcore band?
Yeah.
I think that was on some Identity comps that was mixed with some of the metal stuff that, I mean, it was cool hearing that. That's a great album.
It's weird with hardcore because, I mean, Converge, which would also go on to dominate the 2000s, puts out a split with Agoraphobic Nosebleed, the Poster Diaries in '99. Converge would end up being a massive band in that next few years, and they incorporated a lot of different influences in their sound, metalcore stuff, and a lot of the Usurp Synapse and Reversal of Man, that kind of screamo stuff, Seisha. Like, they incorporated a lot of that screamo sound in their sound too with metalcore. Converge would be massive, and this record I think was huge for Agoraphobic Nosebleed because most people were never going to check them out. But I think Converge is, you know, you have to give them credit as being one of those more interesting bands at this time. I think, I really do think at this time hardcore, that kind of hardcore was just, it was its time in the sun. I think it was, you know, those bands were really putting out great records. Like, as far as punk really goes, the punkier side of hardcore, I mean, I just had Wolfpack, All Day Hell, which is a great D-Beat record, but I really didn't have much more else in '99 for that. And Nine Shocks Terror putting out their record in '99 here. But it's, I think, you know, metalcore really was the dominant force in the late '90s, and I think there's a reason for it. I think even like Slipknot kids, you know, Slipknot comes out in '99. I think it's not hard to see why Slipknot kids in '99, in a few years, had girl jeans and were listening to Poison the Well records. I mean, if you really put it in context, look at what was really happening and going on lively for aggressive music. If you listen to the first Slipknot and you listen to Dillinger, you can see why a new metal kid would, in a few years into that Slipknot record, go on and be a hardcore kid. You can see it. Like, you can see it's not too much of a leap to go from Slipknot to Poison the Well. It's a leap to go from Slipknot to Ravishing Grimness. Yeah. Like, that's a fucking leap. You know, it's...
Yeah, and I... Like, as much as I was getting into all of this, the hardcore thing wasn't really my scene. Like, I wasn't even aware of a lot of that stuff. I did have that Cave-In album, believe it or not.
It's a great album. I appreciate it now more than I did then.
But it's like the main thing the main scene I really got into, which I think it got awesome. It just fizzled out, right? It just got oversaturated, and that was the stoner scene in the late '90s, which I've said it a million times. You could literally close your eyes and just, throw a dart at a stoner album, and it would just be amazing. And there were Seven Zuma 7 put out Deep Inside, Orange Goblin, Time Traveling Blues. I did see that some people said 99, some people said 98, then I saw more that said 98.
I saw both, and I put it on there because I was going to ask you if it was...
Yeah, because I saw both as well.
I wanted to put it on there for the same reason you did. That this is... on my list, I'm looking, I'm like, man, Acid King Bus Wood stands out like a sore thumb on this. Like,
dude, and it's like Acid King is another. That Bus Woods is a great album. They just put out
how uncool was this style? Like, it's looking at it, it's like, man,
that's the thing, man. The Atomic Bitchwax came out with their self-titled. Had Ed Mundell from Monster Magnet, Chris Kosnick, who was also in Monster Magnet for a piece. Nebula to the Center, which is a fucking classic stoner album. Unita, Coping with the Urban Cowboy, which had John Garcia from Caius. Datura, Australian band. Visions for the Celestial was fucking incredible.
I knew you were gonna cover all the stoner stuff. You got the whole...
Oh, dude, that's like everything. Right. Spirit Caravan, Jugful of Sun, Wino. That we didn't mention in like the Doom stuff.
We didn't.
We said it's not... It was more stonerish.
It's definitely more stonerish.
And it was Pentagram. Review Your Choices. That you were listening when I came in.
I was. And you know what? It's a cool record. He sounds so fucking drugged out on that record.
I think that was arguably probably some of the worst times for him. Like
the music sounds great. He sounds like he needs to...
Do you remember... obviously Abdullah, the local, stoner. They were on Meteor City. They had some great albums out. Jeff, the lead singer, I remember the first time I ever met him, it was at a show in Kent, Abdullah's show in Kent, near Kent State University, and it was The Avenue, which I don't even think is there anymore. And
I remember The Avenue.
But
we played our first ever main show at The Avenue in Kent.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, God. And so he was talking to me about Pentagram, because he was like, you're a fan of Pentagram. I was like, yeah, I just started getting into him, and he said that he saw a show with them maybe once or twice, but Bobby Liebling just never came out. It was around that time.
I'm not surprised.
And he just never came out on stage. The band was and I remember reading a lot where there was a lot of that shit happening, and you could hear on Review Your Choices, it's just it's dripping with fucking just drugs.
Yeah, he's pretty drugged out on that record. He's never going to sound bad, but he doesn't sound strong. That's the best way to put it.
Another great album, Core, The Hustle Is On. That's another great stoner album that came out at that time. But stoner was so strong. You had Man's Ruin Records. You had the Music Cartel, Rise Above. You had all these great labels that were putting just killer fucking albums out. I think Fireball Ministry had their album Uwe La Rock that came out that year.
I think that Solinary, and I think that ISIS, Red Sea, and I think that Times of Grace, though, these albums we talked about, I think eventually, just like the new metal stuff helped get kids maybe into metalcore, and the metalcore stuff helped get kids maybe even into grind, dare I say. Because eventually, if you're into stuff like Poison the Well, eventually maybe you get into stuff like Pig Destroyer.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that that Morgion stuff and that ISIS stuff and Neurosis maybe eventually got kids more into that stonery kind of sound.
It did. A lot of people that I knew back in the day and that worked at record stores and stuff, they were into the stoner stuff, and they also loved ISIS, and other bands like that at the time. ISIS, how was it, Pelican?
Yeah, Cult of Luna.
Yeah, Cult of Luna, Jesu,
mm-hmm.
which is
Justin
Broderick. But the stoner scene is crazy. I didn't see any shows back then as much as I was into it. I didn't start seeing stoner shows until years later. But the stoner scene was just so massive in the late 90s to like early 2000s, and it just fucking died. I a lot of these bands, Orange Goblin still put albums out, but the Big Black was like really the last one I got into. I think they started to become like a little more Motorhead-ish, a little less stoner, spaced out. The Atomic Bitchwax, Nebula, they're still releasing shit. I just saw them in Youngstown a couple weeks ago, both of them. Wino's still going strong. We got a new, The Obsessed album coming out soon. Pentagram's still going. Like Bobby Liebling, shockingly, is still alive, which is amazing.
Of all the bands that are kind of like,
they're doing a couple shows, I think, in L.A. Trying to get my buddy Jason to go, but they're doing a couple shows with Victor Griffin back on guitar. So, but that was a huge thing. I had my metal stuff, but then I also had all this stoner stuff that I was getting into, and so many different bands. And 99 was such a great year for that stuff. I remember buying the Atomic Bitchwax. I didn't even know it was out. I walked into Borders in Akron, Chapel Hill, and I looked over and I saw the cover, and I was kind of like, what is that? The Atomic Bitchwax? And then you could listen to it, but they had like a little description next to it. And it literally, all it did was mention Monster Magnet, and I just bought it. And it's a fucking great stoner album. And
I think at this time, stoner rock, stoner metal was, to me, a lot like the hardcore punk thing going on, where it's like, you had like traditional hardcore was not really cool. You had, again, the metalcore stuff was kind of dominating the hardcore scene, whereas you had like bands like Nine Shocks, Hell Nation, Page 99, Fuck on the Beach, doing the more God Stomper, doing the more traditional, really fast hardcore stuff. That was really underground. Mm-hmm. It wasn't what you would think of as hardcore in the mainstream. Was more botch, more cave-in, which is kind of, it's hardcore influence, but is it really like more orthodox? Probably not. It's argumentative. Whereas like, I think, again, what I've said before, like, death metal at this time in 1999 was so well known that it's like the people really playing death metal. You had Waco Jesus, destruction of commercial scum. It says it itself. Regurgitation, like I mentioned before. You had bands that were really doing the hardcore underground, kind of attitude, sepsism, bands like that. Mm-hmm. Grind. You had like, Napalm Death is like a kind of a household name in 99. Mm-hmm. Then you get, My Mind's Mine, and you get, SOB still put out a record, still putting out dub grind at this time. You have Mesrine, like I mentioned before. You have all these Gorbia Necropsy, Go Filth Go. You have bands really keeping the underground alive, which is important, because I think that, for every Poison the Well, there has to be a band that's doing something stripped down hardcore-ish that's not Poison the Well. Mm. For every band that's not doing doom the right way, or if it's not popular, you have to have bands really doing that, underground, the orthodox way. You have to have bands always keeping it. It kind of keeps it, in check, and I think it keeps things in perspective. And I think in 99, especially at this time, the bands that were really making these bigger albums were making, I think, music for a broader audience.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of these labels, like the era that Century Media and Nuclear Blast, Metal Blade still put out good stuff, but it seemed like Metal Blade didn't come back until maybe later in the 2000s. That's when they really started.
Yeah, I think so.
But to me, this was the time of Century Media and Nuclear Blast, that they just exploded on, with a lot of these bands like Hypocrisy, Arch Enemy, In Flames. And I think for me, it was like the greatest era for those labels. And it was like the stoner stuff where I could walk in, oh, cool, this is on Century Media, it's probably good.
Right.
And I would buy it. Now, you can't do that with Century Media.
Right.
You can't do that with Nuclear Blast. You could do it a little more with, but even them,
back in this day, if you saw Relapse Records, I had it.
Oh yeah.
And I think like people forget too, man. Like I mentioned you before, like Dillinger Escape Line, Calculating Infinity, like we talked about. It's no small feat. This would be in 1999. Calculating Infinity would be the greatest selling Relapse Records album to date. To date. And I think death metal fans need to think about that.
Is that even more than Mastodon?
100,000 copies on Relapse alone. At that time, most records they'd ever sold. Now, I want people listening to this to really put that into perspective. In 1999, think about all the classic death metal albums, all these old, and I love all of them, all the old heads talk about. In 1999, Relapse sells the most copies of an album they've ever sold, and it's a hardcore band from New Jersey. That's something that says a lot about. It says a lot. It speaks volumes about how open-minded they are. Number one, it speaks volumes about where music was at the time. That's a lot of records. And I think I love Deceased. I love Incantation.
I knew you were going to bring up Deceased.
I love it, but if you're sitting there wondering, why was Matt pushing all this? It's like, well, bro, I mean, kids were buying it. Your albums are both Incantation, Diabolical Conquest, and Calculating Infinity were both in Best Buy. You can't fault kids for buying one and not the other.
Yeah.
And I think that it says that's crazy. That's a lot of like Relapse would go on in the next 10 years to be even bigger than it was. Massive. Pig to Shorter, like talked about, 99, they put out The Smooth Knob. Eventually, Pig to Shorter would become huge. Like a lot of bands, Dying Fetus, the next year after 99, would put out an even bigger death metal record than anyone we've talked about.
Yeah.
Massive record. Like, they would get huge. And it's, like you said about Century Media, for me, when I was younger, Relapse was like, if I saw it, I had to have it. And that meant the back catalog, too. It meant the old stuff. It meant the old, 7 inches and the old,
I think it's because it was a sure bet. Now a lot of these labels, it's not like that anymore. Now there's some stoner labels that are like that now, like Blues Funeral. Ripple Music puts out some really good stuff. But it was like Man's Ruin back in the day. Man's Ruin Records. I mean, I don't give a fuck what the album cover looked like. If I turned it over and I saw that fucking cat logo and Man's Ruin, I was buying it, and it was incredible. And in terms of hard rock, I was hard pressed to find a lot of stuff. I mean, Black Crowes came out with By Your Side, which I'm a Black Crowes fanatic. That's a fucking great album. Maybe going to like the more just straight rock and roll punk side of it. The Helicopters put out Grand Rock. And I saw some people say Turbo Negro put out Scandinavian Leather, I think, but that was, I think, 98.
I thought that was 98, too. I didn't put that on there. It's a great record. I love that album, but I thought that was 98.
But there really
same
wasn't...
thing with Refused, Shape of Combat, was 98.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't know if you want to go... I think Stone Temple Pilots with their number 4, which, I don't... It took me a while to get into Scott Weiland, but I eventually came around to STP and realized that they really kept putting out just good rock albums.
I don't really hate Stone Temple Pilots.
And I think Scott Weiland was one of the greatest frontmen. I just thought he was great live.
I don't really hate Velvet Revolver either.
No, I never hated Velvet.
Never thought it was...
This era for hard rock, though...
Really rough. It's rough.
That's why it's so shocking when I was going back and I was like, holy shit, that's right. Black Crowes came out with an album that was fucking awesome.
It's just a bad year to put out a hard rock record. Yeah, I mean, I think at this time I feel like you know what I honestly think about 99 too? I think the audience for hard rock was of the age where I think the people that were going to buy a Black Crowes record were aged out. And I feel like you have to hit that sweet spot as a big band. We have to find that age group of people that are willing to buy it. I think that the 1999 was a tailor-made year for kids that were the right age to get into underground stuff, not care about radio stuff.
I mean, just look at our, like what we're listening to at this time. I was, Now maybe there are some great hard rock albums that
I'm sure I
completely
love that
overlook.
Black Crowes record now. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't care about it then.
Like who knows? There could be a bunch of shit that we're just like overlooking and not paying attention to. But for me, it was like, yeah, I was still buying the Black Crowes stuff, but I really was more into all this stuff and the helicopters and getting into different stuff like that.
And Buck Cherry.
Oh my god!
First Buck Cherry came out in '99. It's a great album. I wanted to make sure I wasn't drinking for this whole...
Agree to disagree.
Because it's amazing. I'm surprised you don't like Buck Cherry, which I want to remind all of our listeners that your band is not on Earache, and they are. And that's just all I have to say about that.
Now they're on
They're on Earache Records.
Wow.
So I love the fact... I champion the fact that we have Left Hand Path and Buck Cherry. Finally, I'm vindicated in my tastes.
I will say...
No, I'm not secretly running Earache Records, but I wish I were, because that's exactly what would happen. It's a great album. It's a great hard rock record. Is the first Buck Cherry not as good or better than Issues? I mean, come on.
No, if gun to my head, I'd rather listen to Buck Cherry, yeah.
Exactly.
But I just never... I always likened them to...
Cocaine and...
More like
Lido
just
Lounge.
radio. Like fucking Nickelback type stuff. It is probably unfair, but I think that they were lumped in with all that stuff. But there's probably some more underground hard rock albums that, we're not really focusing on because I was too busy listening to fucking Witchery, Dead Hot and Ready.
It's a fucking great album.
So I saw that tour. I almost wore that shirt tonight.
I'm fucking happy you brought it up. I was worried we were going to bring... Witchery's great.
No, I love Witchery. Probably, here's an album I'm going to bring up. I know you don't like the band at all. This album just fucking threw me for a loop, dude. Vocally, Evergrey, Solitude, Dominance, and Tragedy.
Really? I saw that on a lot of lists. I've never... Didn't Opeth put out Still Life in '99?
Yes, which is a great album.
And that's... I mean, those are... I mean, definitely I see how that's...
Evergrey, though, that album in particular... Vocally, Tom England. I mean, he still sounds great. I mean, he's still like... I still love Evergrey, but this album was just the second album, and it just fucking... I love the artwork. I remember walking into a local record store at Quonset Hut and seeing it, and I thought, holy shit, this must be a new album. And it was better than the first album. The first album was the Dark Discovery. This one was just fucking just a little better. Vocals were great. It was like this creepy, it was power metal, but it had like a creepy vibe to it. Swedish band. So it was very melodic, but awesome album. And it's crazy when I was going back through all the 99 stuff, even Typo Negative, World Coming Down.
Oh, yeah.
Just going back through and looking at all this stuff. And even, I got on one page where I was like, I wonder where black metal albums came out. Dude, this page had like 1,000 black metal albums that came out. And I was like...
Yeah, I picked my top ones. I mean, Abigor and Judas Iscariot are my top. And Panzer Division I had to bring up, and Satyricon, but...
I think Agalot came out with Pale Folklore. I think that was 99.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a million black metal albums in '99.
Dude, just like crazy shit to go back, and I know, our buddy, was it 95 or 99? I think it was Thomas Laterno that he was. I think it was 99. He said it was just that he thought was the best year for metal, and I'm curious what people think is the best year for metal.
Of the '90s.
Dude,
I think that's. I think we should do. I think it'd be great to get a lot of other people, and I think it'd be great to do more years. I want to do more years of the '90s.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'd be great to go through the whole '90s, not necessarily in order.
I'd love to do some in the 2000s because it might be a little harder.
I was thinking, it's funny. So many records come out in 2000. I would be here. We'd have to camp out. I have to put a cot out here. There's too much stuff that comes out in 2000. And I forgot too, if you look at historically, I think because of the Y2K scare, a lot of the albums in the second half of '99 got pushed back.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of albums in 2000 should have came out in 99 but didn't.
Mm-hmm.
So it's weird. 99 is a weird year because a lot of these albums I noticed came out in the first half of the year, and you don't see a lot of them towards like after September. You know, and I think that's kind of interesting. But really quickly, I mean, some stuff I missed: Rotten Sound Drain, Senseless Apocalypse, another great grind band, put out records in '99.
That's why you had Wasp in there.
I mean, yeah, Wasp. El Dorado. I always loved that album. I think it's just a great Wasp record. Again, you're talking about hard rock albums. I think that's to me that's a great example of a hard rock record.
There's one.
My favorite Wasp song of all time, "Damnation Angels," is on there.
That's the one song that stands out. That album to me. I mean, it's after Still Not Black Enough. Now you come out with El Dorado, and then I think, or wait, is El Dorado after Kill Fuck Die?
It's after Kill Fuck Die.
It's after, yeah. So you have Still Not Black Enough, then Kill Fuck Die, which I think is fucking awesome, dude.
Yeah. It's, I mean, not really my thing.
If you listen to it, it is 100% a Wasp album. It's the darkest album they ever put out.
I love into that kind of Nine Inch Nails era that all those bands went through, like Black Acid Evil by Danzig. And all that stuff.
My God!
It's just like
is that what you call Black Acid Evil? Because it's like some people call.
I don't know.
I
call it terrible. I don't know what the fuck you want to call
it.
Fucking
garbage.
Horrible.
But you know what did come out in '99 was Satan's Child, 666.
It did, yeah. Which is a decent record.
And I remember.
It's like a hard rock.
I remember them playing it. And they even played. I think they played live maybe on a fucking ECW episode. I was like, holy shit, man!
Just Jinko era Danzig. Is that like?
But I just got the reissue of Satan's Child. It comes in like a little mini LP.
If anybody listening or watching finds a picture of Glenn Danzig and Jinko's, I'll send you $100. I'll PayPal you $100.
Dude, I saw a fucking picture of him back around this era, where he had like baggier pants on with like a fucking, leather fucking skin tight, short sleeve. And it was just a bad era for fucking...
It was a rough era for mainstream rock guys.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's tough. I don't think it's really tough for, underground musicians. I think they were kind of finding their way. I think if you're Rob Flynn, it's maybe an area you don't really want to revisit. But
he didn't have to do that. That's the thing. He could have done whatever he wanted. But I just think he's a whoring profiteer.
I don't know. I think you know him too well.
Oh, my God. His fucking poetry slam bullshit.
Oh, God.
Is embarrassing. Like, everything that...
I'm not kidding, man. He told me when I saw Machine Head a week before my son was born in 2015. And Biel and I went to the show, and they were doing their 25th anniversary, and he came to me, after the set. We were hanging out. He knows a lot. He has a lot of great stories.
Was that before Dom was?
Yeah, it was a week before he was, week and a half before he was born.
Man,
October. Yeah, it was February 17th of 2015 is when Dom's birthday is. So it was. The Machine Head show was February 10th or something like that.
Well, because what? Was it for Burn My Eyes? Because Burn My Eyes was what, 94?
Yeah, it was the 25th anniversary, I think, of the band, period. It was just their celebration of Machine Head for their 20 year, whatever it was, 25 years. And he has a lot of great stories about, Flashes and Cleveland era and stuff like that. He knows a lot of old metal stories from around here. And he looked at me and he was like, you're the only guy that's ever screamed out for Violent songs and Burning Red songs. And I thought you were just fucking messing with me for the whole time. So that's something I have at least to say for myself. The only person that's ever done that.
I mean, he runs that, he has that podcast that he does, and I can't remember the name of it. Is it No Fucking Regrets?
Yeah.
NFR. And he does a good job. He interviews some really cool people.
His interviews are awesome. Yeah.
He's a bright guy. You can tell he's intelligent.
He's sharp. He's actually a really cool guy. He is a cool person.
I mean, he's still doing it. People tend to love that newest Machine Head that came out. They think it's fucking great after.
This sounds like I'm really not trolling or being funny. After the Burning Red, I really don't care.
No, you're right.
I just really don't care.
Because I mean, who listens to Supercharger? It's fucking horrible.
I have no apologies.
And Through the Ashes of Empires, I think Imperium was the first song on that, which is fucking just awesome. I heard that and I was like, holy shit, these guys are back. And then the rest of the album, I just don't care about. What is it, The Blackening? Is that the one after that? That one was really big and kind of really brought them back. But yeah, I don't care. For me, I don't give a shit after Burn My Eyes, really. And I like the more things change.
For me, it's
the Burning Red.
For me, it's that they peaked. I mean, it's perfect. I mean, I'm not. It's really hard for me to, I have a gore grind band, and I've spent more time talking about the Burning Red than I did the Lymphatic Phlegm Split with which I guess makes me a poser, but the Realized demo came out in '99, so I know that. So if you're a grind fan and you're listening, fuck you, I know more about grind than you do. Anyway, Realized is great, but it's still not as good as the Burning Red. They should know that. They probably do. But I think it was, they never really captured the Machine Head sound. It was the later stuff after Burning Red tried to sound a little In Flamesy, a little European, and I was like, what?
It's too melodic, whereas the first two, Burn My Eyes is completely fucking unique to me. It's just, people can say that maybe they were trying to capitalize on that Pantera sound.
Maybe they were always trying to capture something that was trendy.
But,
maybe that's the course of their whole history.
Yeah, man. And then it's like Burning Red, they were trying to capitalize on that sound. And then really when the metalcore shit started coming back, that's when Through the Ashes of Empires. And then the Blackening. And yeah, man, there's like that real European influence. And I just, to the guitar playing, and I'm not into it as much as, Burn My Eyes. And I certainly, the Burning Red, dude, I listened to it just for you the other day. I don't hate it, but it's just, I don't know. There's something about it.
There's parts that just make you want.
I have to take a fucking shower afterwards after I listen to it, like a fucking hot shower. I'm like in the fetal position.
It's the dope sick of new metal albums.
Oh my god! It's just like, yeah, man. I don't know. He's just whatever. Who's the guitar player in the band is dude from Decapitated.
Really?
Is in the band, yeah.
I don't know who to feel sorry for. That's one of those kind of, moments, I guess. That's whatever. Sure. I just couldn't, Machine Head now I just couldn't care less about. But I think at that time I think they put out, them and Slipknot put out records in those genres that I think worth, I'm proud to put them on there. I'm proud to put them alongside Catharsis and Orange Goblin and, Deranged 3. As far as 99 releases. Deranged 3, by the way, being one of my favorite, as far as brutal death metal goes, my favorite brutal death metal album of all time is Deranged 3. Came out in 99. Stole my mom's credit card to buy the CD, so it's like, that's, a lot of great stuff. It's a cool year, man. I think it's a cool, time period, especially as far as like the brutal stuff, the brutal death metal stuff, and Ohio Death Fest, and the metalcore stuff like I talked about, and eventually like the hardcore stuff. We're seeing Nine Shocks here in Parma all the time, like in Cleveland, around massive, like
killer shows that were always coming to Cleveland, and I we've talked about it before that, and I know that we disagree on the scene now, but back then it just seemed to me like there were so many of these bands, like almost month after month, all these shows were hitting. And now it's like so few and far between. It's like everything that comes around, it's like it's Pittsburgh or Columbus, and it's not really Cleveland anymore. And
this really was the end of the analog kind of era too. Like this really, it's weird. It's the last year of the '90s, and it's really the last year of like, almost like you're getting into the time where it's the before times, where you have like a lot of bands touring. The record industry was still kind of big still at this time. And in the next few years after 99, you really kind of see it fall off.
I think I can't remember what year, I was watching a video with great guy on YouTube, Rick Beato, that does a lot of, he was a producer, he was in bands, he does a lot of like music theory stuff, he interviews a lot of great musicians and stuff, but he did a video recently talking about kind of what happened to music, and he did say in the early 2000s, I can't remember what year it was, that was the most CDs were ever sold. So it was like early 2000s is really when it peaked.
Yeah.
And then after that,
there's a massive fall off. Yeah.
Huge. Yeah, huge. And
it's almost like it's overnight.
Because of Napster and that stuff. Also because of the quality of the popular, like the mainstream shit that was out there. That's why it was so cool to me. Like, I wish I could go back to that time, because I heard a lot of people complaining about the mainstream stuff. And I'm like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about, because I'm still buying albums and the scene's fucking awesome.
I mean, dude, if you really think about it, I mean, like I mentioned before, it's no small feat. I mean, Relapse Records has their biggest seller of this year.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Century Media is huge at this point. Like, these record labels don't get smaller, they get bigger. Metal Blade gets bigger. Roadrunner gets bigger.
Mm-hmm.
But Roadrunner gets a gold mine in Slipknot.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they get a cash cow. Like, Century Media gets huge. You have all these labels that get their, like, Relapse really discovers gold with these other slew of new bands. Like, it's the record industry in the next few years, I think, gets big, and then it really immediately falls off.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a few years there where it's, and again, you're right, shows, all those kind of things, tours really come through. There's a lot of venues. I mean, we all have tons of great memories. I mean, whether it's Agora, whether it's Speak in Tongues, whether it's the Tower, whether it's Peabody's, or
does anybody have good memories of Peabody's? I don't know.
I don't. I'm sure all the people. But I mean, if you like swallowing asbestos and drinking shitty fucking Budweiser, I mean, I'm sure
he's sitting through 28 local bands before you.
Actually, I'm sure there's an Integrity show that's still going on in '99 that hasn't ended yet, but. Which, by the way, Integrity put out a crappy new metal album that they tried to pass off as Integrity Records. Yeah, which we can just forget about that. There we go. That's my mention of that shit for today. But that's, it was a great time for, music. It was a great time to be a young kid getting into stuff like this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a great, why I had a great time looking back at the year. I thought when we first started, because I think we're going to do this. I think this is going to be a series we're going to do every year. I would like to do for the 90s.
Yeah.
And this
we should have done it in order now.
I almost kind of want to do it not in order. I think that's kind of
cool.
At
this point, yeah, we're going to do it.
We'll do like 91 next. But it's like, I kind of like that. I mean, but I think for 99, I when we first started doing it, when I started going through, I was like, oh, shit, I'm going to have like 5.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to talk about Burning Red for 2.5 hours.
Seriously, when you said 99, I knew Hypocrisy self-titled, but then I was thinking, man, 99 is like new metal bullshit. I don't even know what the fuck. And then I started looking and I was like, oh, all right. Well, I don't know why I wasn't thinking of like Immortal. I don't know. For some reason, I thought it was like 98, 90. I don't really, remember when albums come out, like, especially in the late 90s. There's so many great albums that came out that I was like, holy shit, this is going to be awesome. I think it's just as good as 95. I think that when we do something like 92, death metal albums are probably going to dominate the 92 discussion.
Oh yeah,
because of the fuck that year.
I think death metal is the genre for 91, 92.
Mm-hmm.
Up really 1990 to 1994. It's pretty dominated by death and underground. I mean, I can definitely come up with a lot of stuff in the early 90s for hardcore and punk, and even grind and stuff like that. But it's, and even, I think for those early 90s years, I think hard rock is really,
that's going to be a big
that's something. After 95, you really kind of see, this is one of the first episodes we've ever done where we haven't talked about like really a lot of non-metal rock bands.
That's what I'm saying. Other than Black
Slipknot's
Crowes.
your hard rock in 99.
Yeah, that's the thing. Other than the Black Crowes album or the Helicopters or,
I hate to say this, man, your biggest rock record of 99 is a fucking Limp Bizkit record.
that's
like,
the
that's
thing.
kind of where, and I'm not trying to be funny, like, that's what you get here, you know?
The fact that band still exists.
I mean, it's really...
I never even understood it back in the day.
I didn't really get it either.
When people were playing that shit. And I saw them in 98, Ozfest 98. And they came out, and I think they all walked out. Like a big fucking toilet bowl walked out. And I think maybe the band came out, and then Fred Durst walked out of the toilet bowl. And when they started playing, everybody was just like...
We don't talk about it a lot here on the podcast. But you know, me and Justin are big hip-hop fans and big rap fans. And you know how much I love rap music. And they didn't even incorporate good rap music well.
Yeah.
Like, that's, you know what I'm saying?
That's what I'm
they
saying.
didn't even do that
It's
right.
literally
So it's
fucking like just trailer trash, county fair, fucking, it's like a proactive commercial.
Candiria is a late 90s band, I think, that incorporated hip-hop and heavy music in a really cool way. These jabronis just... Like you said, it's just Parmatown Mall put to like music. I was just like, it's just fucking ridiculous.
Generic fucking garbage that I just could not. I couldn't take it seriously. Although,
even today, it's popular again today. It's retro again, and I refuse to take it seriously.
Who makes it retro? That's the thing. It's like I see this shit online where people are like, "Oh, it's retro." It's like, what's retro?
It's just old now.
When you were like 4 in 1999.
I'm here to tell you, it sucked.
Like, it sucked then and it sucks now. And people are like, oh yeah, it's fucking pure metal.
I really wish that kids would bring back Dillinger Escape Plan and Botch instead of Limp Bizkit.
Yeah, that's the thing. I even had a buddy that was like, not going to name names, but he was like, yeah, my girlfriend's really into that. She loves 90s music. And I'm like, there's a lot of great 90s music.
Right.
This ain't it.
Yeah, that's not good.
This shit, what else came out? Fucking Static X came out that year. Power Man 5000.
Oh,
why the fuck would I listen to any of that shit when I could listen to Testament the Gathering or Rotting Christ or Dimmu Borgir or Spiritual Black Dimensions? Or
we should have done this podcast in a Spencer's Gifts. Like, that really would have been appropriate.
A Pac Sun.
A Hot Topic, the original Hot Topic.
Oh my God.
Nu metal was massive. It was big. And
did you have the sunglasses, like the alien eye sunglasses?
No, God, I did have the baggy jeans. I mean, we all did. But
you had Jankos. Just admit it.
Yeah, I think everybody. That's one of the jeans that were sold. I mean, that's like, I couldn't buy skinny black jeans. Sorry, they didn't. I didn't. It wasn't '84. I couldn't go in a time machine and go to a Possessed concert and buy Chris Dora's black jeans. Sorry, but there's the thing with this time period was there were so many. You would see, and it's funny, I'm not trying to make a joke, but you would see at a death metal show or a hardcore show, like you would see like a wide-eyed little nu metal kid walk around because they were like, I'm going to a heavy show, and they would stand up, but and eventually you'd see them at a few more shows, and they'd be into some. It was nu metal was for some people an entry point. And you know what?
That's fine.
Say whatever you want about nu metal, and I will give it. Yeah, we're fair here on Gnarcast, and I'm being fair. To be fair, it was an entry point for some kids to get into heavy music.
That's fine.
And that's fine.
I agree.
It doesn't make it good.
Yeah. I mean, if some kid told me that, I worked at, a record store at Quonset Hut, and I had kids come in and, they were into nu metal and shit. And there was a lot of them that when I tried to turn them on to heavier stuff, they just weren't having it. It was almost like that casual Metallica fan.
Yeah.
Where they would be like, oh yeah, I'm into metal. Oh, you like Metallica? Here, listen to Testament. And they'd be like, nah, I don't want to listen to that. And so it was like they refused to go beyond.
Yeah, you're never going to reach somebody like that.
But there were people absolutely that I think used this as, an entry point to get into like heavier stuff. And then I remember, just meeting people several years later, and they didn't really listen to this shit anymore. They listened to heavier stuff.
I remember meeting Primer 55 when they played with, I forget the show they played with, the Euclid Tavern. I think they played with, they played with VOD or some band that we wanted to see, and we talked about like Morbid Angel with them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and it's like I realized that even at a young age, like these guys are just kind of they're trying to make a paycheck. Like, yeah, they have the spiky hair and look like they work at Gadzooks, but they like good shit, And I get it, whatever. Like, do your thing, man. Like, but I think it's we're fucking ending the 99 podcast on the new metal tip, and I wish we would have ended it on Immortal. But I mean, like, that's what
we can end it on Immortal. We gotta cleanse it.
We gotta find a good segue. But no, it was the sign of the times, and I think that it's
in terms of
I would like to say it's behind us, but it's coming back. So
dude, it ain't gonna last. It's like some fucking moron trying to bring disco back.
Disco Inferno from WCW.
Oh my god. It's like fucking, what is that classic line from the movie Detroit Rock City? Disco. Man, fucking disco blows dogs for quarters, man. And it's like, that's what new metal is to me. And it's like, that's just the mainstream stuff. So while people were rotting their fucking brains and getting ass cancer listening to that shit, there was so much better, much more shit you could listen to. And I don't know, man. It was a great year. Also the year that I think Blaze left Maiden, and
that's
Bruce
right.
came back.
And Bruce comes back for we get the 2000s with Brave New World.
Yeah.
Poor Blaze Bailey.
He just had a heart attack.
It's fucking not his. I mean, that's a shitty gig, man. Like, that takes balls to take that gig. Gotta give the guy credit. Like, that takes balls to take that gig. Nobody's gonna like you in that band.
That's the thing, and I'll give him credit. I mean, I just saw Tim, Ripper Owens with Arnie a couple weeks ago. Fucking amazing. Dude sounds amazing.
Dude still had to sing here's the thing about Blaze, man. Dude still had to sing the old songs live, which is not easy to do in front of thousands of people who don't want to see your ass anyway.
It's weird. I didn't like him in Maiden, but his solo shit, like just Blaze or Blaze Bailey.
You're not going to join a band. You're not going to join Iron Maiden and be a chotch off the street who worked at Take 5. Like, they know a guy that can sing. I mean, he can sing. Is he Bruce Dickinson? No, but who the fuck is?
Yeah.
I mean, besides their original singer, who's better. We'll see you guys next time.
Yeah, all right.
All right.
Thanks for coming on. Take it easy.